Hola chicos. Today in this video we are going to talk about the rest of the irregular preterite. But before we get into new content, we need to really quick talk about the other groups of the preterite that we have learned so far. If you remember back in chapter 7, we learned about the regular preterite conjugations along with cargar stars. We've talked about verbos pequeños. We've talked about Y verbs. And then in chapter 8, we got suela verbs. At this point, it is very important that you know how to conjugate all these types of verbs into the preterite tense. Today, we are going to focus on three new groups of irregular preterite verbs. We're going to talk about I verbs, U verbs, and J verbs. And before we even start talking about how you conjugate these verbs into the preterite, something that I want you to take note of is the fact that these verbs are completely irregular, meaning that the stem of the verb, that's the part before our AR, ER, IR ending of the infinitive, the stem of the verb in all of these verbs is completely irregular, and all of these verbs use irregular endings, meaning we don't follow the normal easamos an, sorry, not easamos an, Easte o amos ardon for the preterite, or iste io imos ierdon for the preterite. They use kind of a mix of the two because they are irregular verbs. They have irregular preterite endings that you will see in just a minute. So to get started, we're going to talk about I verbs. There are three verbs in this group. It is very important that you know which verbs are I verbs, as well as knowing what the verbs mean, their conjugations, and what it means for a verb to be an I verb. What are some of the exceptions or the rules or the irregularities of the I verb category? So there are three verbs in this category. We have venir, hacer, and querer. And you'll notice I have highlighted in the yo form, all of these verbs have an irregular stem, and that irregular stem has an I in it, hence why they are called I verbs. These verbs are called I verbs because they have an irregular stem and there is an I in that stem. So let's start talking about their conjugations a bit. First thing you'll notice that is that none of these verbs have an accent in them. All the verbs we're going to talk about today, none of them have accents. Second thing that we need to talk about is hacer. If you look at hacer, we'll notice that it goes hice, hiciste, hizo, hicimos, hicieron. But in this third person singular category down here, the C of the stem, of the irregular stem, has changed to a Z. And the reason we do that is because if we had the conjugation written out as HICO, that would be eco. Unfortunately, eco does not sound like hacer, so we have to change the spelling of this conjugation to match the rest of the verb, which is why the C changes to a Z in the third person singular. Hacer is the only verb that does this. This is the only time this will happen with hacer in the third person singular. Last thing that we need to talk about is this bullet point right here. Querer actually changes meaning in the preterite. What I mean by this is in the present tense, querer means to want. However, in the preterite, querer changes its meaning. This isn't terribly uncommon. There's three other verbs that also do this in Spanish. So if we want to use querer in the preterite, we have to know that what it really means is to try to do something. We cannot use querer to express a want in the preterite tense. So that takes care of our I verbs. We have venir, its io form is vine; querer, its io form is quise; hacer, its io form is hice. Venir, vine, querer, quise, hacer, hice. And then over here, you'll see a little write-up of what makes these verbs irregular. Second group we're going to talk about today are U verbs. And you can see from this very zoomed out image, there are a lot of U verbs in this category. We have poder, poner, estar, tener, saber, andar, and haber. Something that if I zoom out, you'll notice about all these conjugations is again, they have no accents on them. U verbs have no accents on them. But what makes them a U verb is if we look, all of their stems have a U in them. So poder, pude, poner, puse, estar, estuve, tener, tuve, saber, supe, andar, anduve, haber, hubo. Okay? They have no accents. They have a irregular stem that has a U in them. The second thing that we need to take note of is the fact that poder and saber change meaning in the preterite. In the present tense, poder means to be able to. So this is what I'm writing in red. Present, to be able to, or like can. Able. But in the preterite, it changes its meaning to manage. So you need to know that if you say si pude, it means I managed in the preterite. The other verb in this group that changes its meaning in the preterite is saber. Normally, saber means to know a fact or how to do something, but in the preterite tense, saber changes its meaning to find out. So this is the preterite, and this is the present. So saber changes its meaning to find out in the preterite. Um, and last thing we need to talk about is this verb down here, haber. Haber means there was or there were. So when you see hubo, Hubo, this means there was or there were. It's important for you to note that haber is kind of a really weird verb. We don't see its preterite form very often, which is why I'm not teaching you the yo form or the tu form or the nosotros or the ellos, ellas, ustedes. For the purposes of this class for Spanish 2, you only need to be concerned with the third person singular form of haber, which is hubo, and you need to know that it is a U verb and that it means there was or there were in English. So again, we have our preterite U verbs. Poder is pude, poner puse, estar estuve, tener tuve, saber supe, andar anduve, and haber is hubo. Like I said earlier, since these conjugations are so irregular and there's so many of them, it's really in your best interest to focus on the yo forms for now, because once you have the yo forms down, then you can start worrying about the rest of the verb conjugations and the verb endings. One last group we're going to talk about today, those are J verbs. There are 4 verbs in this group here. Decir, traer, conducir, and traducir. So if we zoom out a little bit, there we go. Again, just like all the other verbs that we have talked about in this video, there are no accents on any of these conjugations. The second thing that we need to take note of is the fact that they are called J verbs. The reason these verbs are called J verbs is because there is a J, this random J that appears in all of their stems, like dije, traje, conduje, traduje. That is why they're called J verbs. Like I said, they have no accents. And the other thing that we need to take note of is that third person plural, or ellos, ellas, ustedes ending. If we look here, we will see that decir in the third person is dijeron. This is irregular because normally in regular verbs, the ellos, ellas, ustedes ending is eron. But for J verbs, we can't use that ending. Instead, we're just going to use eron. So decir goes to dije, traer, traje, conducir, conduje, traducir, traduje. And that is the rest of the irregular preterite. You have this page of notes in your notebook in OneNote. You'll see right now I'm in the content library under Lección 9, Gramática 9.1 Irregular Preterite Verbs. I did push this out to you so you have access to this page. So it is in your notebook in the Lección 9 tab. Like I said, these are all very, very irregular verbs. So what you need to do, you need to focus on the yo forms, not for Friday. Boop, not for Friday. For Thursday. You will have a quiz over the yo forms, just the yo forms, not their endings, not anything, just the yo forms in class on Thursday. So I would give you something like venir, and you have to write vine. So it is really important that you study these preterite yo forms. We will talk about them in class together the rest of this week, and start incorporating these into the rest of the preterite. So today in this video, we have talked about I verbs, we've talked about U verbs, we've talked about J verbs. You need to study the irregular preterite yo forms of all of the verbs on this page for class on Thursday, because you will have a brief quiz over the preterite yo forms of these 3 sets of verbs. Adios, chicos.